So look at that table for example A. And while I'm recreating it roughly here, I want you to think about explaining what the heck all these numbers mean, how you would interpret this, because I'm going to ask a couple of you to help me out here. I'm just recreating what you have in front of you, so I can point at it and talk about it as we go through this. Some of the hardest part of statistics is just understanding what all the numbers mean. Putting labels on them. Who wants to take a shot at explaining to me what this table represents? Yeah.
Is it the price of homes and how many are sold per within those price ranges?
Price of homes, how many were sold? She's right, but we need to be even more specific because I don't think anyone bought a house for $80.
It's like that's in thousands.
Aha, so we need to make sure we're real clear. See where it says in thousands? Price in thousands? So now the 80 means $80,000. And over here we have frequencies. So somebody tell me what this 3 represents.
Homes, the homes that are sold. In
Correct.
between that price range.
Okay, I want someone else to try, 'cause I think you got it. I'm glad you got it. Someone else tried to tell me, interpret this row for me in words. Uh-oh. Does silence mean nobody knows, or we're all shy? Yes.
So it just means that 3 homes were sold between the price range of $204,000 to $234,900.
Beautiful. Let me repeat what she said. 3 homes were sold between the price range of $204,000 and $234.9 thousand. What is $234.9 thousand? Hold that thought. $234.9 thousand.
234,900.
Beautiful. 234,900. Right, the comma is where the point is, really. So we're saying that between here and here, there were 3 homes between 204,000 and 234,900. A lot of times, if you don't know what the table even tells you, how are you going to answer any questions about it, right? You want to be able to answer the questions. So 3 homes were sold in that price range. How much was each one of those houses? Good question. Good question. There were 3 homes in this range. What were the prices of those homes? We don't know. All we know is they were somewhere in there. They could have all 3 been 204,000. Could have been one was 204, one was 205, one was 206,000. We don't know. Everyone agree that we just know that we have a range? Similar if I asked you, raise your hand if you make between $10 and $12 an hour. You would raise your hand, but I wouldn't know how much you get. Do you get $11.50? Do you get 10? So we only have a summary of the results here. How many total houses was somebody looking at when they made this table? How many houses? Did I hear 28? Where did you get that? We added the frequencies. So frequencies are essentially how many prices I looked at. I looked at 28 prices and just counted how many were in this range, how many are in that range, and so forth. So we add those all up. There are 28 houses in there. All right, so let's get into the vocabulary. This is called a frequency distribution. The frequency distribution just tells you your frequencies for a certain number of categories. That's what we have over here. What's different here is each house gave me a quantitative variable. It gave me a number, the price. So the first house might have been 89,000. Another house might have been 236,000. So each house had a price associated with it. So I have quantitative variables. And so what I do is I divide all those numbers into what's called classes. That's why it says class limits at the top of your page there. Classes. These are kind of like classes, but the classes are defined by numbers over here. Okay? The first thing we want to talk about are the class limits. Those are the easiest ones. The class limits are the smaller and the bigger numbers. This is the 80 is the lower class limit. This is the upper class limit, meaning we're counting all houses between 80,000 and 110.9 thousand. Each class has limits. So a question on the exam might be, what are the class limits for the last class? And the class limits would be 235.0 and 265.9. Each class has a lower and upper limit. That's the easiest one we got. Now it gets a little confusing. Okay, on limits? I'm going to skip over class boundaries because that's the hardest one. And class midpoints is a little bit easier than that, but I'm going to go down to the very bottom of the page to where it says class width. Do not be the person who gets this wrong on your quiz or your exam, because I'm going to tell you the most common error is to think, oh, class width, you're thinking of how wide it is. So people subtract these two numbers to see how far it is from here to here. Kind of seems obvious that's what you'd want to do. That's not what you want to do. Because you ever understand that the width makes you think you should just figure out how wide that one is? Look at what it says. The difference between two consecutive lower class limits. Yes, sir.
Would that be like 141.9 minus 110.9?
So those are upper class limits, but yes, it works there as well. Let me get another color and talk about it. It turns out the upper works just as well. So he wants to look at this number and this number. Those are consecutive limits. Those are consecutive upper class limits. It works there as well. Consecutive means one right after the other. If we subtract those, 141.9 minus 110.9, what do you get? 31? 31. My red pen is not showing up. I have to switch colors. We agree that's 31? If we took the actual definition that said use lower class limits, maybe I would pick the 173.0 and the one right after it. Consecutive means one right after the other. It doesn't matter which one you pick. If I took those two and subtracted, I still get 31. I hope. I better. Not someone made the table wrong. So to find the class width, you're talking about how far is it from one class to the next one. If you subtract these two numbers, you'll get 31. If you subtract these two, you'll get 31, and so forth. All the way down this side, and all the way down that side. So class width is not how wide one class is by itself, it's how far from one to the next one. Okay on class width? You guys are quiet today, it makes me nervous. Okay, moving up the page. The next one up says the class midpoints. The value in the middle of each class. The value in the middle of each class. Exactly halfway, the middle, halfway between 80 and 110.9 would be the middle. How do I find that?
Add them together and divide by 2.
Add them together and divide by 2, she says.
Yeah.
What is that essentially doing?
Finding the average.
Finding the average, which we're going to stop using that word a little bit later semester, maybe next time. But right now we'll call it the average, that's what you've called it before. Add them up and divide by 2 to see what's halfway between. So just for the first class, bless you,
Thank you.
I'm going to take the 80 plus, where did it go? 110.9. Add those up, then divide by 2.
95.45.
We agree? Someone agree with her? Yes, no? I got some nods. Not that I don't trust her, but we all make mistakes with our calculators, gotta agree. I did this once, I don't remember what class it was, where someone answered like that, and we went on, and it was like an hour and a half later, someone goes, wasn't that supposed to be at 7? Speak up if you don't agree. Either you're wrong or she's wrong, and we gotta figure out, but luckily we're all agreeing. If you didn't get that number, double check your work. Make sure you add before you divide. So what is this number?
What's in the middle?
It's the middle, it's the mean, it's the average, it's the class midpoint for the first class. This is the midpoint for the first class. So the directions on your online homework or in your written lab will say, list all the class midpoints. List all the class midpoints. How many should I have? I should have 6 because I have 6 classes. So I'm going to calculate the next one with you and then we'll talk about shortcuts. Shortcuts are always nice. We love shortcuts. Let's calculate the next class midpoint. What am I going to do?
The same thing.
Same thing, but start with the 111.0 and 141.9. Add those up, divide by 2.
You should change the subtraction into addition.
Oh, thank you. Add those up. I said add, didn't I? My brain said add, my hand said subtract. One of them had to be right. Thank you. What do I get?
126.45.
126.45? So that's the midpoint for the second class? Now technically we could do that 4 more times. I have faith that you could all do that 4 more times. But I don't want to do it 4 more times. You know this class width that we found earlier? That I didn't label? Here it is again. We found it a couple times. Let's talk about how we found both of these over here. We found the 31 the first time by looking at 2 consecutive upper limits. And we found this 31 over here by looking at 2 consecutive lower class limits. Well, here's 2 consecutive midpoints.
You just like add 31.
Yeah,
Exactly. If you subtract them, they're 31 apart from each other. So what would be the easiest way to get all my other class midpoints? Jenna just said it. Jenna, right? Just keep adding 31, right? Because each class is 31 away from the next one. Instead of doing all these averaging, this is my second class. The shortcut would be to just add 31. That'll give you the next one. Add 31. That'll give you the next one. Anything that lines up. The lower classes will line up. The upper classes will line up. The midpoints will line up. So the easy way here is just keep adding 31. Add 31. I now have 157.45. These guys here are my midpoints so far. You can keep doing the averaging if you want. If you're a math nerd like me, you think it's fun. Sometimes we like shortcuts to save time though. Is everyone okay with what I did here? I added in my head. Don't tell me if I'm wrong, please. Please tell me if I'm wrong. So the next one, I'm going to add 31 again. That's 188. See what I'm doing there? Sarah, can you not read my writing?
No, I can't.
Okay. Is there anyone that wants to know why I'm adding 31? Yes, you want to know? Okay. All right. You okay with how I got these two though? Okay, so we could keep doing that. And so if I averaged these two, if I average those two, you could check me, you would get this number. And if you average the next ones, you'd get this number, and so forth. But because we already found that the class width was 31, we add 31 to get to here, and here, and here, and here, and so forth on this side. Think about the middle. If the middle is right here, there's no number written there, I would add 31 to get to the next one every time. So instead of calculating all those averages, we're just adding 31 to find what the next one will be. It just saves us some time. You don't have to do it that way, but it's a lot quicker. Especially when you're doing them online and there's maybe, 8 classes or something, that's a lot of averages to do. So once you find the class width, it makes finding the rest of those really easy. Well, we need a couple more. I found how many so far? 4 of them? And what's the next one? Did you guys find it already? There's 2 more, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Let you guys find it. 219? We agree with her?
Yep.
And the next one?
250.45.
250.45? So these numbers in these boxes here are my class midpoints. If you're doing this one on my stat lab, it's going to ask you to list them all separated by commas. So you would type 95.45, comma, 126.45, comma, and so forth. Anybody who's afraid they couldn't do this on their own? So does that mean you don't have any questions? We know how to find the midpoints. We know how to use the class width to find them quicker. Okay, so that's class midpoints. Now's the hardest part. The class boundaries. So I'm back up to the third thing in my little list down there. So we talked about upper and lower class limits. Those are lower and upper limits, lower and upper. We talked about midpoints, which we were just calculating, the numbers right in the middle. Class width was the difference between 2 classes, but now the boundaries. You can read it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Values used to separate classes, halfway between an upper limit and the next lower limit. I'm going to draw a number line. I'm going to draw a number line to explain what they're talking about, because I think when you put all these numbers in order, it makes more sense. So let's say, that's a straight line. 80.0. 80.0. I'm starting with 80.0. My next class, that class ends at 110.9. I'm kind of exaggerating and making a big space before the next one starts. Better put it sideways so we don't run out of room. 111.0, and then the next one ends at 141.9, and the next one starts at 142, and it keeps going. We'll use some color here. So we all agree that my first class is between here and here? And my next class goes between 111 and here. And I deliberately left big spaces. I know technically they're not that big, but that way you can see them. Those are all my classes on a number line. The class boundaries are the numbers in between the classes. Like this number right here is a class boundary. Yes, sir.
So 0.1 basically.
0.1? What do you mean? No, it's the actual number on the number line. So this number is 110.9. This number is 111.
So wait, so would it be like 110.95 or something?
It will end up being 110.95. We'll talk about how she figured that out. But we're talking about the number that's halfway between here and here. I'm just going to draw visually first, then we'll talk about how to calculate it. In between, there's more, I didn't draw all my classes. Everyone okay, like on a number line, the number that comes between 110.9 and 111.0. Visually, we're okay with that? How do we find halfway between 2 numbers? Add them up and divide by 2, just like we were doing before, right? So this point right here is going to be 110.9 plus 111.0, bless you, allergic to stats today. Adding them up and dividing by 2. And hopefully you get the same thing that Jenna did in her head when she was guessing. Or maybe she was calculating, I don't know. 110.95. That is one of my boundaries. Questions on that number? Let me show you how it relates to this. We're talking about the number that comes after this outside of this class, so it's not in this class, right? It's a little bit bigger than this class, but before this one. It's not in this class, and it's not in that one. It's halfway between those two. That's a boundary. How about this next one right here? 141.9 plus 142.0 divided by 2. You should end up with 141.95. Questions on where those are coming from? Again, notice 141.95 is at the after this guy, outside of this class, but before this class. Here's a question for you. Without using your calculator, what do you think the difference is between these two class boundaries? Oh, you guys are brilliant today. That class width is your best friend. If these are 31 apart from each other, how can I find the rest of my boundaries? Keep adding 31. So if we keep adding 31, 172. I added 31 to this one to find the next one. Make sure you're putting that thing up somewhere. And if we do the next one, 31, what is that, 203? Is that right? Add it in my head. Don't ever trust me to add in my head. Questions? How do I know when to stop?
When you start to go over
Say that again?
The highest limit.
Yeah, look at my highest limit. My highest class limit is 265.9. So as soon as I get past that one, then I'll be in my last boundary. So am I there yet? I don't know. I'm almost there. If I add 31 to this one, that's 265.95. So I just went past this guy, so that's how I know where to stop. Guess what though, I missed one. There's one that I missed. So we found all the numbers that come at the ends of all these. 110.95, 141.95. So if I was checking off, I found the numbers that came in all these places. We agree that all of those numbers come after those? Did I find the one that starts before this?
Yes.
Yeah, the 234.95 is before this one. I have all these even. Guess which one I don't have? Ah, the very first one, the one that comes right before the first class. The boundaries are before and after.
So would you just subtract 31?
Yeah, subtract 31 to get back over here. Because you don't really have another number over here to average. So the best thing to do is either follow your pattern or just subtract 31. And you would be at 79.95? Is that right? How many class boundaries do I have? There's 7. How many classes do I have? Why is there an extra one?
Because we found the value before the
Because you have the before and the after. So there's always one more boundary than you have classes. I had 6 midpoints, one for each class. But my boundaries, there are 7 of them. And again, on my stat lab, they want you to enter these separated by commas. Questions?